And 3, 2, 1, record. Hello, audience. Welcome to another roundtable and fulfilling a promise that I also made while that I mentioned at the end of Dark Phoenix. So, despite the events that this magical year 2020 has given time and time again, the movie The New Mutants has finally been released. End of August for America, and on my end, September 2. So it's like almost a week by the time we're
Yeah,
doing
it was
this.
like that. It was like that round here in Britain too.
Jova is not here because, as far as I know, America still has most of its cinemas closed. So, but don't worry, when the commentary comes around, we'll be sure to bring him as well. But anyway, me and Dweebs, as mentioned, had just seen this movie very recently. Now, unlike with the previous movies, was the Mutants movie that I had the least experience with. I'm not really a reader of the New Mutants. I have experience with one or two of the characters involved in this movie, but it was like a fresh take. But to talk very briefly about, the things surrounding this movie directed by a guy called Josh Boone, and also co-written by him. The other being a certain Nate Lee. I don't know who he is. But Josh doesn't seem to have that much under his belt. He started working in 2012. But if you're being on the internet enough to have an interest in his movie, you know that this has had a lot of trouble development cycle. This was supposed to be part of a new launch that the X-Men franchise was supposed to have after Apocalypse, with the Dark Phoenix being the start of a new trilogy and this starting another one. And judging by how this movie is structured and ends, my major theory is that Dark Phoenix was supposed to launch a trilogy where the classic cast was to go in space, while on Earth, this new cast would have adventures involving that. But of course, all of this has been rendered moot due to 20th Century Studios, now it's called, being acquired by Disney Corporation and putting to a stop to plans for future sequels to this movie. Mind you, unfortunately, even if they allowed that, it wouldn't. The circumstances would not favor it because not only the movie, as far as we know, is bombing currently, with a budget of 67 slash 80 millions, probably including all the reshoots that were not included. Um, at least in its first period, is doing only like 20 millions. At least Wikipedia is stating here, almost 21. So I don't know how much it will levitate, but it's still not a lot.
It didn't help.
Um,
It doesn't help that there's a lot of things going against it. There's all the
yeah,
there was all the
hold
delays.
on.
There was the fact that it was released alongside Tenet.
Yeah, due to the part of the sort of relaunch of cinemas everywhere.
Yeah,
Uh,
they only just
but
started
there's
up
some,
really.
but uh, but unfortunately, there's something surrounding also for the criticism regarding because one particular character involved, in this movie, Sunspot, is from South America, and as such, the director had picked a South American actor. The problem is the ethnicity because. In the comic book version of Sunspot is African Brazilian, I think, still, partially African at the very least. While the actors chose is, as far as I know, pure Latino. And it didn't help that there was a bit of a bad communication with the press. Not only that, but as we will go into the movie, there is like one or two scenes where to make a point coming across, a character goes into basically racist insults, which even if it's the point, we're not well received by the press and by a lot of the audience. But instead, for the actual structure of the movie, you heard about reshoots, but it seems that at the end of the day, before launching this movie, basically the spokespeople had said, no, we're just using the original cut. But I don't know about you, Dweebs, but watching it makes me feel like either they still, use some of the new footage or still cut away something because some scenes it suffers from a couple of traditional problems dictated by potential reshoots and recuts, namely that some scenes don't connect well together,
Some scenes just
and
flat out stop as opposed to end.
there are a lot of weird transitional problems that I will get. One of which I will get just in the narration of the movie, but. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's about time we can just start it because the good news is that you don't really need too much of a knowledge of the previous movies. This is actually a good standalone movie, if you ask me.
Plus,
Um,
it's relatively short. It's only 94 minutes.
yeah, I think it's actually the shortest of a bunch of the X Men movies.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. And I mean, yeah, so you think this is the 20th anniversary. Okay, not exact. I can't remember when exactly in 2000 the first film came out, but
I forgot.
but we're in the 20th anniversary year of the first X-Men movie, so in a way, this being the
It's a
final
good.
one in this particular year is kind of fitting.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. And one thing that I will also reiterate at the end, I do believe this is for as likely as it is, it's a better way to send off the X Men 20th century franchise rather than
Yeah,
Dark
because
Phoenix. It's a more,
we can't really call it Fox.
yeah. But anyway, let's just start. But before doing properly the summary, since the movie centers only around a surprisingly low amount of characters, might as well telling them about briefly without spoiling too much, and then introducing them to the plot. Because this is a situation that is described by many kind of like of a superhero version of and more serious of Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a bunch of people trapped inside a sort of a mental, facility with, with a
There's
doctor
only
and trying
really
to find a way out.
there's only really two locations in the whole movie. There was the bit at the beginning and the hospital.
Pretty much. So there are if I recall correctly, like one, two, three, four, five mutants involved with this, and the Doctor itself, which is also a mutant. But don't worry. The movie doesn't take its time to reveal immediately. But what we do have are Anya Taylor Joy. I actually don't remember.
She was most recently in Glass and well before that Split
Okay. Oh, right. As
and the Playmobil movie.
oh, as Ilenia Rasputin, aka Magic, one of the characters that I actually know of. Get these lives. She's supposed to be Colossus' sister, although they don't mention it here, mind you.
Well, not the
Um,
well now in hindsight, there's not much point in doing that.
Pretty much. Her powers are well represented in the movie, basically tapping into the force of an extra dimensional plane called Limbo, allowing her to use a suit of armor and a magic sword. She's
Although
also
it's not really that effective a suit of armor if it only covers your arm.
yeah, well, arm guard, I guess. She also has a hand puppet called Lockheed, which is more of an Easter egg than anything because the character is more associated with the character of Kitty Pride. But I guess we wanted to put it here just so they could shoehorn it. I don't know. Anyway, then there's Charlie Heaton as Sam Guthrie, I forgot what he's called, which is Cannonball, the other mutant that I actually know of. His power is to channel energy and release it really fast in order to have a burst of speed, But unlike it's something like, say, the Flash, it's something that he can't control really well. That's why the name Cannonball. It's literally like a human projectile. Um,
And it's interesting as well. The character is American, but the actor is actually from Leeds, i.e.,
so
England.
British.
Yeah,
Let me see if well, it doesn't seem to have much of a resume for him
well, he's
either.
been in
Uh,
Stranger Things,
okay. Then there's Alice Braga as the Doctor.
aka
Um,
aka she was a doctor in Elysium.
and there's a bit of adaptational villainy here because she was actually the character was actually a good guy for the original counterpart, but more on her later. Sorry. Um, Henry Zaga, the actor that I mentioned before, as Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot. He can channel solar energy and turn and release it briefly into becoming basically kind of like Human Torch, plus some super strength of
Yeah,
sort.
yeah.
And then top billing Macy Williams, which if you're seeing Game of Thrones you should know who she is, as Rain Sinclair, aka Wolfsbane, which is apparently a mutant, even though she just suffers from lycanthropy.
And
Okay.
her character is Scottish, even though Maisie Williams is from Bristol, which I can tell, which for those of you who aren't British is like miles down south from Scotland.
And finally, our actual protagonist here, Blue Hunt, as Daniel Moonstar, Cherokee, Native American, with particular powers that we'll mention in the recap. So
Although,
basically, like we said, sorry, go on.
although interesting thing, I don't recall any of the mutants being referred to by their mutant code names in
This
this
is one
movie.
case. This is one case where it's not like the first X-Men movie where they outright refuse to call that, but it's more of a case where they don't need to, and there's some tongue-in-cheek moment. Like one thing that was also for the trailer is, for example, for Ilenia, where near the end of the movie they're like, "Oh, that thing is magic," and she turns like, "So am I." It's a bit it's cringy, I know,
Yeah, some of the
but
dialogue is kind of cliche.
you're still partially right. Most of the cool names of the mutants are not actually said. It helps that the Danny Moonstar mostly in the comics gets referred by her own name. She has some code names like Mirage, but mostly she prefers to just be called Danny Moonstar. Anyway, let's properly start this. So we start with our protagonist, Danny, which lives in a reserve with the rest of her family and the rest of the Cheyenne. But we start like in a very almost confusing way because everything is exploding, everything's blurry, people are running away left and right.
This
You
one
know,
scene at the beginning and a certain fight at the end is probably where most of this budget went to, because it wasn't a very expensive movie by superhero standards. It was only like 67 to 80 million. I think the only film in this series that was cheaper was the first Deadpool.
but anyway, Danny's father, played by Adam Beach, basically takes her to the woods and tells her to just stay like safe in a tree trunk of sorts while he tries to save other people, and then like 2 seconds later his corpse gets thrown into Danny's face, which makes her even more frightened than she is already.
Oh boy.
She gets out for a second. It's also snowing, by the way. It will be a sort of a plot point later. It's snowing, and she like passes out onto the snow. The camera zooms in on her face, and when she wakes up, she finds herself stranded on a bed in a very uncomfortable manner. Like we see later in the movie that beds can have proper restrainings, but instead she has this weird cuff on her right wrist, and we get this drawn out scene where she has to drag around the bed in trying to understand where she is. Um,
Which kind of makes me wonder. I mean, isn't isn't that kind of thing meant to prevent you doing that?
yeah, exactly. Like whoever chained her, we know who it is, but whoever chained her did a very sloppy job at that. But we don't need that much time to find that out because as soon as Danny notices a camera in the room where she is, she asks to get out, and someone answers in the form of Dr. Reyes that I mentioned before. She shows up, so is actually quite affably, in this first part. She presents herself as, very calmly tells Danny that everyone else is dead, from her tribe, but and that she's probably a mutant. but that she can try to help,
Yeah,
with her
because
problem.
yes, because as we all know in these from these movies, a lot of people who say they just want to help are definitely the most trustworthy sort.
This is actually kind of ingenious, it's constructed because the audience is also led to believe that the Doctor actually means well with her words, even
Unless
what
you've
we've
seen the
said.
trailers.
Not even that, Lives. Even if you have a past experience with the X-Men, you know that people hate mutants. Still, this is still in terms of timeline placement. This is probably around after Dark Phoenix, but before Logan, because they use smartphones, for example.
And and there's some stock footage pulled from Logan used for a
Or
specific
later, Liz,
purpose.
actually. I'll mention this when we actually become relevant because it's actually a good way for this to be connected with the rest of the franchise. But yeah, so basically, Danny gets herself to her own room. She gets to the room, and it seems to be in good terms. The first day of therapy is instead a disaster because we get presented to the other characters,
Therapy.
and they're a bunch of dicks. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but
there's
Buffy,
that
Buffy constantly um, basically do those advances to pretty much all the characters, and Elenia instead is very
rude.
rude and not just yes also rude but also defensive but mostly rude to the point of like I mentioned using racist insults against Danny by calling, using calling her to for being a
Yeah,
Native American.
that
I don't
makes it that kind of thing can make it really difficult to feel sympathy for a character.
keep in mind. I understand the point. The point is to make the character a jerk, before actually making her becoming a better person, which is kind of what happens to Magic in the comics. I do believe with some minor working, this would have just worked just fine, and cause less problems. Um, But unfortunately, I don't know who actually is to be blamed for this between the two writers, either Boone or Lee, but whatever. The other, uh, Cannonball seems to be just on his own. He doesn't really express himself too much, but instead, um, um, Wolfsbane. Yeah, sorry, audience. I'll probably just call these characters by their code name because I'm more familiar with this. Wolfsbane instead actually seems to understand a bit better, Danny, um, because like she's less antagonizing. But the point is that the session doesn't go well because Magic just storms away completely despite the doctor trying to be threatening by saying, "Oh, you're getting in isolation." She's like, "Well, fuck this." Um, but while she's at it, by request of the doctor, Magic does show Danny a bit of everything of the facility. Very supposedly facility. It's more like of a dilapidated villa, kind of like a twisted parody of the X Mansion, because there's a main structure, a church, with a lot of grays, mind you. It's something that the movie never explains, but it's more, left for visual storytelling. Um, and like another structure and the gate that it's open. So we get like a Cars like moment where Magic tells her, "Oh no, don't worry, the gate is open. We can actually go wherever we want, but the nearest city is 30 kilometers." Danny tries to sprint away, and she promptly, stomps a face flat into a force field that's around the facility.
As Illy laughs in her face.
Pretty much. However, we also see that Wolfsbane has managed to keep an eye on her, at the same time, in her wolf form, which apparently the wolf that they used for the scenes is not CGI, but an actual trained wolf called Chuck. Good to know. Um, so anyway, basically the situation is a bit shitty. She actually takes a look at the clock tower, and we immediately cut to her trying to commit suicide by jumping from there.
Now, I was just gonna say
Um,
that's rather early to in the movie for them to go the whole suicide route.
don't get me wrong, I actually understand what we're going. It's actually quite a slightly powerful moment because Danny, like as she herself says, Danny doesn't have anyone anymore. She doesn't have a house anymore. She's in a place where that's mostly hostile towards her, with no clear idea what to do with her life. And keep in mind, these characters are supposed to be teenagers, still. So of course, there's also that internal turmoil going on. The only reason why she doesn't jump is because Wolfsbane actually reaches her and tells her, convinces her to keep going. This starts a romance subplot between the two, but I do believe it's actually better executed than in most of, especially superhero movies these days. So props for the movie to actually do that, especially with an LGBT couple. But to be fair, I will ask more about Shiroi for her opinion when
Yeah,
I'll be sure.
Shiroi's out of all of us in the group, Shiroi's the most qualified to talk about it.
Pretty much, I will believe her word over everyone else. Um, But anyway, we know that the boys are the one that instead work mostly in the kitchen, doing the dishes and preparing, particularly Bobby. But we also get to see in the meantime that Cannonball tries to do some training by strapping himself onto like a rope that's anchored on the ground and try to test his power, even though he mostly bonks on the ground constantly. And Wolfsbane also throws like a comment at a question asking if he knows he's just doing on purpose, which later on in the movie we do know that yes, Cannonball does it as self-loathing and tries to inflict harm onto himself for his mistakes, but more on them later. Um, so yeah, that's the team presented, and the glorious life in the facility can continue. The problem is that the problem starts arising that immediate night, where the camera surveillance that the doctor monitors tells that Danny releases a lot of psychic energy inside her psionic. I forgot what it's actually defined. And Cannonball, which is doing the laundry, in the basement, actually notices that a washing machine that shouldn't be turned on actually starts moving. He timidly goes there, touches it, and then it's transported to probably a flashback of a mine where he
Yeah,
used to work.
because his dad, I think he said his dad made him work in the mines.
Yes, he himself tells it later. But yeah, he finds himself in the mines, and he tells, "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry," and his father turns
What have
and
you
tells him, "What
done?
have you done?" Before the washing machine explodes in his face, um,
I thought
and
he was gonna die from that.
no, the problem is that Cannonball in this movie is the one that sustained the most damage. This is symbolized by the fact that he constantly has a cast on his left arm, and the poor guy gets pummeled left and right. It's kind of like the most victim out of the bunch, but more in a second. So, sorry. So that is already like weird on its own, but the problem starts keep fighting from there. Magic continues to antagonize more Danny, but at the same time, the team starts bonding a bit together. They have like a moment where they have a moment of where they like in the common like in the main living room we're trying to watch TV like
Watching
Wolfsbane is trying
probably
to watch.
some old Fox movies.
Yeah. And the magic kind of gets pissed off by Danny and tries to actually attack her using showcasing her powers, But the doctor intervenes, and that's it to reveal that she's a mutant too because she can project force fields in order to, separate the two. And that tells the viewer that she is the one projecting the force field onto the facility. Um,
And she orders them both, even though Miss Rasputin was the one who instigated the thing. They're both sent to bloody
in
solitary.
isolation. Yeah. Um, but yeah, one thing that the doctor had said to everyone, not just Danny, was the same kind of thing that a more twisted thing that Professor X tells to the X-Men that they're here to have their power, to actually understand better their powers, and once they will know them better, they will be able to actually get out. Um, so that's basically their hope, the motivation, their actual motivation. But when we're actually in the rooms, in the confinement rooms, then he hears that Magic talks to her hand puppet of Lockheed and tells about a secret place she goes in and where the people will not find her. But then when she starts also tripping again, the psionic energy, the camera picks up, goes off the charts to the point that it like destroys almost the camera. Um, and she starts reliving that moment. And if I recall correctly, Magic starts a bit hallucinating on her own by having a flashback of a being that supposedly kept her confined in a room as a child, as a small child, and potentially and most likely abused her. Um, but the doctors intervenes almost immediately, and then he's found with red on her hand because like it's mostly blood. Because she had like this flashback of the night of the supposed tornado. So
Yeah.
the doctors tries to understand better, this. Um, with a specific test. It's not like a drug. I think it injects something like a bit of a sedative, but it's not like a true machine. It's mostly something just to monitor her emotional state. And it's at this moment that the combination of everything has Danny have like a vision of the footage we have seen in Logan. The fact that the mutant children are gathered there, most of them to be subjected to the Weapon X program, but mostly to be tortured. Um, and this is basically your first hint that the doctor, is not really working for Professor X because she keeps telling the man that, no, the person
Yeah.
that
Oh,
my
yeah.
boss is in charge. Who is the actual person in charge? More on that in a second
Yeah,
because
because
there
I
is
mean,
a bit of
why would Professor X trust someone in a really dodgy looking hospital?
But the team, I forgot if it actually happens before or after this. The event schedule is a bit confused for me. But the team also has a moment during a night where they actually sneak up in an attic, where they actually do partake in an actual true machine test, which is also knowing a bit better the character. We knew already from before that Bobby comes from a rich family, actually, but nobody knows what his powers are. We know that he's a bit of a womanizer, but it goes along with the ladies.
Yeah, he has the
Um,
power to woo.
then we know that Cannonball feels regret for what he's done, supposedly killing his father, and that he secretly wishes to stay in the facility potentially forever to atone from that. Um, we know that Danny mentions that the pendant that she has on her neck represents a bear that was given by her father because of a popular belief that Native Americans have. You've seen it probably as a meme recently. The idea that in your soul exist two animals. In her case, a bear. One that feeds on positive energy that represents your positivity, and the other, a demonic bear that represents your negativity. And the pendant serves to remind you that the bear starts really small when you're a child and only grow up if you allow it to. It's a nice moral. But when it comes instead to magic, we know that she has killed a lot of people, which is in tune with her character. She is potentially a mass murderer, for that, and she shows not much regret, to be honest.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think she's in the wrong kind of hospital.
but when we have the immediate day where the doctors actually knew about them going to the attic, they believed that they were not spied, but instead they were. And basically almost practically tells them you're all grounded, kinda. Um, but then like we cut from that to the night where Magic just said that off screen she has spiked her tea and made her fall asleep in
Yeah, this
tension
is
so
yeah. It was from
they
this
can
point
have
of
a
the
party.
it was from this point of the movie that I was thinking, wait, was something missing here? Like, was there meant to be like a scene where she gets drugged, but they cut it?
I guess. But basically, it's party night. It reminds me a bit of a smaller scale of what happens in Dark Phoenix, where these teenagers actually start behaving like teenagers do, with parties
Yeah.
and stuff. and also shipping moments because Wolfsbane takes Danny thanks to the air duct that she's able to climb in, get it because she's a wolf, she sees in the dark and shit. Outside, so they can rest in some graves and actually have a romantic moment together because they see that the force field actually doesn't let even rain pass, so it creates like a charming orange effect. Um, in the meantime, though, Bobby goes near the pool and she sees supposedly magic inside the pool, and they also try to have a romantic moment together, which also means that Cannonball is the only one who doesn't get laid in this movie. Poor
Yeah,
bastard.
but I
Uh,
was thinking to myself, nah, no way magic suddenly became this nice.
but well, it's not like that. She's more again, part of her being a teenager, she's she tries to not seduce him, but try to have fun, Um, but the thing is that this gives the occasion of Bobby to reveal his backstory, the fact that. Due to his power, being uncontrolled in classic X-Men fashion, he accidentally killed someone he was in, his girlfriend. He literally burned her to a crisp. So he's basically traumatized by the event and doesn't want to have a girlfriend anymore because he's afraid that the emotional rampage will make him lose control again. Magic reassures him that he cannot burn her, which is true. Tapping into the energies of Limbo allows her to be immune to this kind of thing. But obviously, he doesn't know if to trust her or not. But basically, she tells him to find her, which I think she does teleports in a room or something. He turns and basically has this kind of not hallucination, it's not properly an hallucination, but basically he has this moment where like a hand takes him from behind and it's the charred corpse of his girlfriend who's on fire and tries to get to him. It actually reminded me of that moment in Event Horizon with the burn guy who said, "You left me to burn."
I haven't seen
Uh,
Event Horizon, but I have seen a lot of other movies that have that kind of thing in it.
But this also it's actually also a good point to reveal this backstory of Wolfsbane because she did mention before. Um, she is from of Catholic origin, meaning that when her mutant powers of lycanthropy manifested, she tried to consult with her local pastor, which promptly deemed her as a witch and branded with a hot iron, carrying the word W. What the fuck?
Uh,
Um,
what a very nice congregation she has there.
Jesus Christ. But uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, this
that was the I think that was the most graphic part of the movie.
that actually comes later, Pedro, but that was actually part of the backstory because seeing what happened to Bobby, Magic is basically tells the doctors, it's Danny who's doing this. Something should be done about it, and goes very hostile. The tension is clearly building up, but the characters sadly cannot properly get out. The doctors surprisingly still manages to be in control this and not breaking down. I'm actually surprised that she didn't raise her voice or not. Um, but yeah, basic and that basically allow as I think what happens the next day uh, is that the twist. The next day, the doctoress receives the proper email that usually tells her what to do. Before had received instructions of like take samples from Danny, analyze the results, and the results came in, and they tell her to terminate her after getting some samples because she's too unstable. And who sent the email? The corporation she's working on, Essex. If you don't remember, movie wise, these are the guys who took the Wolverine samples at the end of Days of Future Past. Not only that, this is the corporation that Mr. Sinister holds. So again, this connects again to Logan with the fact that the Essex Corporation was working with this thing. Then the other corporation from Logan took over, took the samples, and started their own working with their own Weapon X project. It's actually a nice way to tie it out, but unfortunately, this keeps having maintaining a tradition of having Mr. Sinister being the only X-Men villains who never shows up in person. and doesn't do much,
And we're not gonna,
unfortunately.
and in this continuity at least, we're not gonna see him in person because of
Pretty much.
well, stuff.
But yeah, basically the doctor learns that she has to terminate, Danny, and she does it in a she tries to do it in a particular way. She claims she has to do some test. There's another intimate moment between Wolfsbane and Danny beforehand. But when, like an idiot, when we're actually alone, the doctress starts basically telling her all of her plan
She's
instead
like
of,
she turned into a Bond villain for some reason.
pretty much. I mean, I get the idea that Danny could not do anything because she was stranded and no power to actually free herself. But come on, you could keep the facade for 5 more minutes, for fuck's sake. She even does the whole metaphor that says, "Oh, my parents, my mom was a veterinarian. We had a dog that actually had rabies once. We had to put it down." Jesus Christ. But thanks to her acute sense of hearing, well, hey, no. Another thing that happens first. The distress situation causes Danny's power to basically skyrocket and have magic's own fear manifest herself. These slender-like creatures that have smiley masks on them, and when they remove them, they have no eyes and sharp teeth. Apparently, the grunt of these things were done by Marilyn Manson.
Yeah,
Um, okay.
yeah, yeah. As if it's like I think in terms of credits to the movie, I think Marilyn Manson's outdone co-composed the score for the first Resident Evil
Still, what a bizarre way, especially
movie. I
because
mean,
these things do not talk properly. They're just having like grunts.
yeah,
But
I
basically,
can just imagine the casting process. Who can we get that can grunt a lot and scream really creepily and scarily? Hmm, I know, a singer.
basically, this confirms the backstory that Magic had. The fact that she was part of basically a child abusing cult, and she only managed to get away thanks to her mutant powers manifesting. Her and supposedly her fat little kid, even though at this point still looks like a hand puppet, basically a coping device. But basically, this is the point where everything starts going up because while Cannonball and Magic are trying to defend against the creatures,
Mhm.
uh, Bobby gets attacked in the kitchen, but he's mostly isolated, and thanks to his power, he manages to get away pretty easily. And Wolfsbane tries to go back to warn the doctors, but she hears in the meantime the fact that Danny is in danger, so she uses the doctor to sneak upon Dr. Race and claws the shit out of her. She seriously gives her serious damage, even though the doctress, and this is a bit a weird moment, the doctress injects her with something, probably a sedative, but
I can't
basically
remember it
this
doing anything.
no, she does. She injects her in the leg. Then the doctor goes away completely, blood emaciated and stuff like that because she loses a shit ton of blood. We see Wolfsbane removing the syringe from her leg, but this doesn't do anything to her. She's perfectly fine in all the scenes later on. Oh, I forgot to mention, there was a scene beforehand that showcased instead Wolfsbane ultimate fear. While she's in a shower, he actually gets to see the priest before that branded her with another brand iron, and this time he brands her on their fucking neck. Seriously, we even get this dark comedy moment where she says, "No, no, I killed you," and he's like, "And just like Jesus Christ, I've been resurrected."
Yeah,
Like,
very subtle message you got there, Mister Good and Mister Lee.
something like a hot iron on your neck.
Jeez.
Um, but yeah, basically everything is going off the rails. The doctress is going away. The characters basically manage to reconvene and agree on the fact that yeah, she needs to die because otherwise the force field will never be lifted. And then he suspects that we will never actually be free and only will be keep used for testing, even if we change place. Um, so basically, we need to organize to actually get to her. They found her pretty easily, I think, in the lunchroom or anything. Um, and she still despite her injury, she still manages to have the upper hand by using the force field against her five separate and almost killing Danny by suffocating her. But of course, this triggers her power and showcases her own fear, the thing that destroyed the reserve, the Native American reserve, the demon bear. Believe it or not, this is actually a character, like a thing from the comics.
I
Basically
gotta say,
implemented.
the bear looks pretty good actually for a film of that budget.
It's unbearable. He literally shows up, eats the Doctress, and now he's the final boss. Um, but yeah, Danny is basically in this catatonic state. She can't wake up, so we get this fight scene where everyone tries to use their powers effectively. Cannonball gets thrown away. He tries to do something, and he does like uses her powers for a second, but then he gets thrown away immediately. Magic does most of the fight, showcasing that Lockheed is also real. It was just residing in limbo most of the time, which is a cool thing. Um, Bobby tries to do something but fails miserably too. He gets stomped flat. Wolfsbane tries to protect the Danny most of the time,
I
but she
thought
almost
when
gets
I
killed
saw that bit, I was like, wait a minute, is this Looney Tunes now? Or is
too.
it because now it's a Disney movie, they're trying to replicate the Mickey Mouse shorts or something?
but uh, when Danny has this internal moment where she sees basically a vision of her father, basically telling her, "Hey, you created this kind of fear. You can be in control of that. It's okay." And then goes away. Basically, this prompts her to wake up and actually tame the demon bear. She asserts her dominance over it, and basically it dissipates just as he removes, her necklace, the amulet, showcasing that she doesn't need it anymore. As the sun rises, the characters see the fact that the facility is basically in ruins, the doctor is dead, and they confirm that the force field is not anymore. And they promptly decide to venture future as the new mutants, wherever destiny will take them. But
Uh,
out of universe, absolutely nowhere, sadly.
yeah, this will be my head canon. They got lost and
Die on
eventually,
their way back to their planet.
yeah, either that or Mickey Mouse drove up in his car and shot them all or
Uh-huh.
something.
I gotta admit, and by the way, this is the end of the movie, no post-credit scene. I have to admit, though, this is a bit of a shame because I actually have been sold on this team. There have been a couple of other problems, like the fact that there is one of the founding members of the team, Karma, a Vietnamese girl, which is also lesbian. She was actually one of the first LGBTQ characters in comic history, if I recall correctly. Um, but the creator of the comic of the original comic line, um, where is he? I forgot the name. Bob McLeod was disappointed in how they actually handled the characters, including the supposed washing of Bobby. And also went nitpicky and said that they also misspelled his name in the credits as Mac instead of MC. Um, but yeah, but otherwise, I actually really enjoyed this movie for what it was. Like I said, it's actually a good note, a more positive note to end the X-Men, the Mutant 20th Century franchise on. It's still not perfect. It's you can, like I said, it suffers from the scene transition. Most of all, the Cannonball's trucker hat, which consistently can't stay on and off on his head. You see a scene where he has on, the next scene he has off, and vice versa. The most egregious example is when he tries to actually check on Bobby, who is pounding on the door. He doesn't have his hat. He says, "Oh, go get it," and then immediately when he reaches it, he has his hat on. Um, but there are other stuff including that. But otherwise, the story is enjoyable. The characters too, minus the few moments at the beginning of the magic, you know. And the premise for a new trilogy is there. It's just that the circumstances were all against the movie. One of the reasons why the reshoots had to be made and then scrapped is because most of these characters actually aged, and already these characters were supposed to be teens, and their actors were, of course, not, but aging didn't actually help them. So of course, it was a mess to
Yeah,
deal with.
apparently Antonio Banderas was gonna was gonna
because
do a
as
post-credit
Bobby's
scene,
father,
but
as Bobby's father, it was confirmed that he was supposed to be that.
but that
But
obviously that didn't happen.
yeah, in general, again, it's a disappointment that kind of way because I wish this team actually stuck. Just like with X-23 at the end of Logan, if Disney ever does like a move where they try to implement like we with dimensional transferring bullshit some of these characters into the MCU for their own, I actually wouldn't be against that. But considering the controversy surrounding the movie and the low sales, I'm afraid, unlike with X-23, this might not happen, not even at aged up
And
version of
it's
the
a
character.
very interesting choice of director in the first place. That Josh Boone's mostly known for directing The Fault in Our Stars, and as for his other filmography, none of them are horror movies. So
Yeah, that's also another thing. These you can tell this is not a proper kids movie. I think it was rated PG-13 in America. But the thing is that you can tell that this movie was supposed to be a bit more psychological horror. That the initial trailers actually gave the idea it was supposed to be more on that line. The final product still isn't like super happy-go-lucky, but it's not completely horror. A friend of mine actually gave a good comparison. It probably was supposed to be It Chapter One, but instead ended up being It Chapter Two. You know, level of horror.
I mean,
But I actually
it's not 3 hours long.
well, in terms of how on horror was handled. But still, aside from these minor quirks, that, well, these quirks that could have been ironed out easily, mind you, with a proper editing team or other consultancy and all.
That's the thing.
Um,
Apparently, the original editor had to leave the movie at some point. So
Another pile onto the mess. But still, I actually enjoyed this movie, and I do believe it could have been better a bit for even for more people with just some actual tinkering. What about actually the score with done by Mark Snow? Do we actually like it? Do you think it's
it's
unmemorable?
it's okay. It fits the movie. But that's about it. Although it's interesting because Mark Snow's more famous for the guy is more famous for composing the theme tune for the X Files.
Hmm. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember much of the score here. But like I said, I honestly still enjoyed it and I wish it would actually have led to something. But for as it stands out as the conclusion of the Mutant series from 20th century, it's alright. What about you, Liz?
Yeah, it's basically I wouldn't call it a high point of an ending for this long running series, but it's a better last film to go out on than Dark Phoenix.
Hmm.
I mean, the film knows what it wants to do and does it fine. I mean, not great. I mean, like I said, there were those feelings that there were those missing scenes. It felt like, um, and there are also a time for a horror movie. It wasn't really all that scary, except for the Marilyn Manson monsters and the really graphic and unsettling priest branding scene. But other than that, it was just an average horror movie. But I do appreciate that that Fox, well, not Fox
20th
Studios,
century.
yeah, the 20th century, and Boone and Lee tried to do something different with comic book movies. That's one thing I appreciate from the latter day 20th century movies is that unlike the MCU, the 20th century were more willing to go for more go for movies that Disney wouldn't dare touch, like say stuff like Deadpool and Logan, and
Mm,
this movie. And one thing I am worried about is that is that when because the rights are back at Disney now and Marvel Studios.
yeah.
I'm hoping that they'll at least keep the uniqueness factor when they try and make new versions of these movies again, as opposed to just being the 90% of the time jokey joke movies that the MCU often makes.
Well, we'll see. To be honest, right now it's a thing that we'll have to worry about. Not immediately
Yeah,
anyway.
because it's gonna be a while because Marvel have got enough on their plate.
And the phases have been delayed already by a couple of months due to the charming events of 2020. Black Widow is supposed to come out in a couple of months. I saw a trailer for that, and yeah, it looks nice. I just don't know what it's gonna essentially be talking about. I'm
Right.
not sure if I will actually going to see it in theaters. I'll see.
So, with that on to our commentary, that wraps up 20 years of 20th century in 2020. Get it? That wraps up 20 years of the 20th century movies for us.
Well, at least when it comes to Roundtable, look forward towards the actual commentary, at least with Midweaves and Jova. Maybe we'll pull Shiro in, why not? Just to, have her opinion
Yeah.
of Wolverine and
Plus, we still
that.
got Deadpool 1 and 2 to do.
But to be fair, this movie is friendly towards her. She doesn't need that backstory. But whatever, see you for the actual commentary.
See ya.